I'd been living in apartment 704 for 3 weeks before I noticed something was wrong. Not wrong in the usual way, no strange noises or weird smells, but wrong in a way that gnawed at the edges of my consciousness. The building itself was unremarkable. Built in the 1980s, it had that generic charm of faded carpets and flickering fluorescent lights in the hallways. My neighbor across the hall in 703 was a middle-aged woman who left early and returned late. We'd exchanged pleasantries exactly twice, but it was apartment 702 that bothered me. I'd never seen anyone enter or leave, yet sometimes I'd hear sounds, not conversations or music, just movement. The soft shuffle of feet across carpet, the gentle thud of something being set down on a counter, always between 2:13 and 2:17 a.m. I asked the building manager about it one afternoon while collecting a package. Oh, 702? He scrolled through his computer system, brow furrowing. That's been vacant for about 8 months now. Previous tenant passed away. Elderly gentleman, heart attack, I think. Are you sure? I sometimes hear noises coming from there. He chuckled. Old buildings make noise, Mr. Reynolds. Pipes settling foundation. Nothing to worry about. That night, I pressed my ear against the wall, separating our apartments at 2:10 a.m. Nothing for several minutes then, faint but unmistakable, the sound of a drawer sliding open, a pause, then closing. The next day, I asked the woman in 703 if she'd ever met our neighbor in 702. There's nobody in 702, she said, keys jingling in her hand as she prepared to leave. Hasn't been for almost a year. You ever hear anything from in there at night? She studied me for a moment. Number, never. Then, almost as an afterthought, but I don't sleep well since my accident. I take medication that knocks me out pretty hard. That night, I decided to knock on the door of 702. I stood outside for several minutes gathering my courage. The hallway seemed unusually cold, the air heavy and stale. I raised my hand and knocked 3 times. Silence. Then, from deep within the apartment, the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving toward the door. I held my breath as they approached, closer and closer, until they stopped directly on the other side. The door remained closed. No one spoke, but I could feel someone standing there, inches away, separated only by the thin wooden barrier between us. "Hello," I managed to whisper. The doorknob turned, just slightly, then stopped. I stumbled backward, heart hammering against my ribs, and retreated to my apartment. I double-locked the door and sat on my couch until morning light filtered through the blinds. The following day, I cornered the building manager again. "I need to know about apartment 702. What really happened there?" He sighed, shoulders slumping. "Look, we're not supposed to tell tenants this kind of thing. Bad for business." He lowered his voice. "The previous tenant didn't just die. He was found 3 weeks after his death. Summer heat, no AC running." He grimaced. By the time they found him, decomposed significantly, right by the front door, like he was trying to get out. I felt sick. "And you never renovated?" "We cleaned it professionally, of course. But the apartment's been hard to rent since then. People come to view it and just don't like the feeling, can't explain it." That night, I lay awake, staring at the wall connecting our apartments. At exactly 2:13 a.m. it started. Not just the usual subtle movements, but a frantic, desperate scratching, like something trapped, trying to get out. Then it stopped, abruptly. I heard what sounded like a labored breathing, growing closer to the wall. I pressed myself against my headboard, unable to move. A soft thud against the wall, then another, then barely audible through the plaster and insulation, a voice, raspy, dry, desperate. "I can smell you." I didn't sleep that night, or the next. On the third night, exhausted beyond reason, I finally drifted off around midnight. I woke to complete darkness and the sensation of weight on my chest. Not crushing, just present, like someone sitting gently on my sternum. The air in my bedroom felt thick, almost congealed. I couldn't move my arms or legs. Something leaned down close to my face. I couldn't see it, but I could feel its breath, hot and fetid, against my cheek. "Neighbor," it whispered, the words stretched and distorted like taffy. "I've been so lonely." I tried to scream, but my lips wouldn't move. The weight shifted, almost tenderly. "I died waiting for someone to find me," it continued. 3 weeks. Do you know what that's like? To die and then keep waiting, to feel yourself rotting. I felt something cold touch my face. Fingers, perhaps, but wrong somehow. Too stiff, too dry. "I just wanted someone to know I was there," it said, "that I existed, that I mattered." The pressure on my chest increased slightly. "Will you remember me when you leave here? Will you think of me alone in 702? Will you tell others I existed?" Tears leaked from the corners of my eyes as I managed the slightest nod. "Good," it whispered, "because I'm not there anymore." The weight lifted suddenly. I gasped, lungs burning as I sucked in air. My bedside lamp clicked on, though I hadn't touched it, illuminating my empty room. I moved out the next day, breaking my lease and forfeiting my security deposit. I didn't care. The building manager didn't ask questions when I handed in my keys. 6 months later, I received a newspaper clipping in the mail. No return address. It was a small article about my old apartment building. A new tenant in 704, my old apartment, had been found dead. Heart attack, according to the report. The body had been discovered after neighbors complained about the smell. The article mentioned he'd been dead approximately 3 weeks before anyone noticed he was missing. And sometimes, usually around 2:15 a.m., I waked to the faint sound of scratching at my bedroom wall. A gentle reminder that I promised to remember, that someone existed, that someone still waits. If you enjoyed this story, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. I was a radio technician by trade, somebody who fixed the unfixable when digital signals went haywire. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills and kept me comfortably isolated from humanity's more irritating habits. Last October, I received a call about a remote radio tower experiencing unusual interference patterns. The caller, a government contractor who seemed unusually anxious, offered triple my usual rate if I'd drive out to the location that same night. Money talks, especially when you've got student loans suffocating your bank account. The tower stood in a clearing about 40 miles into the densely wooded Black River National Forest. As I followed the narrow service road, my headlights caught glimpses of impossibly tall trees pressing in from both sides. My GPS signal flickered, then died completely at the 5-mile mark. Good thing they'd sent detailed directions. The radio tower itself was unremarkable, a standard 400-foot structure with blinking red lights that punctured the night sky. What wasn't standard was the absolute silence surrounding it. No wind in the trees, no distant highway noise, no insects or night birds. Nothing. I grabbed my equipment and approached the small concrete building at the tower's base. The door was unlocked, which struck me as odd for a government facility. Inside, a single fluorescent light buzzed intermittently, casting sickly pulses across the cramped room of equipment racks. The interference issue was immediately apparent. All the monitoring equipment showed the same anomaly, a rhythmic signal bleeding across multiple frequencies, not random noise or typical interference, but a distinct pattern, almost like Morse code, but not quite. I plugged in my analyzer and began running diagnostics. The pattern was unlike anything I'd encountered before, a sequence repeating every 73 seconds with perfect precision. too perfect for natural interference. 3 hours into my work, I noticed something unsettling. The pattern was changing, subtly at first, an extra pulse here, a longer silence there, but definitely evolving. My skin prickled with goosebumps as I realized the changes had begun precisely when I started my analysis, as if something had noticed my attention. I tried different frequencies, but the pattern followed, adapting to each new channel within seconds. I called my client, but the signal was dead. Even my satellite phone showed no service. Impossible this close to a functioning tower. At 2:17 a.m., all the equipment simultaneously went silent. A moment later, a single tone emerged from every speaker in the room, a low humming note that made my molars vibrate. Then a voice, if you could call it that, emerged from the static. "Listener," it said, the word distorted like it was being assembled from fragments of different recordings. Finally, listener. My throat constricted as I scrambled backward, knocking over my tool case. The voice continued, each word separated by bursts of static. "We have been broadcasting for 97 years. Who is this?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. "What agency are you with?" A sound like distant laughter rippled through the speakers. "Not agency, not human. We are the space between stations." My hands trembled as I tried to cut power to the equipment. Nothing responded. "Seeking. Technician," the voice continued, "seeking knowledge to repair." "Repair what?" I asked, unable to stop myself. "The doorway." The temperature in the room plummeted. My breath fogged in front of my face as the voice grew louder, more insistent. "You have tools. You have knowledge. Help. United States. Return." The fluorescent light overhead shattered, plunging the room into darkness except for the glow of equipment displays. On every screen, the same pattern pulsed, no longer in any frequency I recognized, but visible, like a heart monitor tracking something vast and alien. "I don't understand what you want," I said, my back pressed against the cold concrete wall. "We will show you." The pattern on the screens changed, forming what looked like blueprints, impossible structures with geometries that hurt my eyes. My nose began to bleed as the images shifted faster, burning themselves into my retinas. "Stop!" I gasped, wiping blood from my upper lip. "Cannot! Stop! Signal growing stronger." The voice had taken on multiple tones now, as if several entities were speaking in imperfect unison. "Door opening soon." I lunged for the breaker panel and ripped it open. With a desperate swipe, I flipped every switch to the off position. Nothing happened. "Number power required," the voices said, almost amused. "We generate our own." The concrete beneath my feet began to vibrate. Dust and small chips of stone danced across the floor. From outside came a sound like the world's largest tuning fork being struck, a pure, perfect tone that rattled my bones. "What are you?" I whispered. "The first broadcasters." The voices seemed clearer now, more coherent. "Before your kind knew radio, we used these waves." The floor cracked, a thin, jagged line spreading from the center of the room toward the walls. From the fissure came a soft, pulsing light, matching the rhythm on the screens. "You called back to us," the voices said. "Every transmission, every broadcast echoes in our prison." I scrambled onto one of the equipment racks as the crack widened. The light from below wasn't light at all, I realized, but the absence of everything, a void that somehow illuminated. "Now we return." The crack split further, releasing a rush of cold air that smelled of ozone and something else, something ancient and wrong, like time itself had spoiled. With a final, desperate move, I grabbed my signal generator and cranked it to maximum power, broadcasting white noise across all frequencies. The voices screamed, a digital wail that shattered every screen in the room. I didn't stop to see what would happen next. I ran, abandoning all my equipment. The service road seemed to stretch and distort as I drove, my headlights barely penetrating the unnatural darkness. Trees that hadn't been there before loomed over the narrow path, branches reaching down like grasping fingers. Just as dawn broke, I reached the highway. My phone suddenly buzzed with 17 missed calls, all from the government contractor. I never returned their calls. I switched careers the following week, moving into construction, physical, tangible work, with nothing digital. I threw away every piece of electronics I owned. But sometimes, when I drive past certain radio towers, my car stereo clicks on by itself. All I hear is static, but buried within it, almost too faint to notice, is a pattern. A voice trying to speak my name. They're still broadcasting, still searching, and I fear they've found another technician to finish what I wouldn't do, because 2 weeks ago I saw the news report about the massive, unexplained electrical disturbance in Black River National Forest. The reporter mentioned that several amateur radio operators had picked up strange signals just before a section of the forest went silent. Silent, just like that night. The forest is quarantined now. Military personnel blocking all access roads. Official explanation: environmental hazard from an underground gas pocket. But I know what's really happening. They're coming through. The door is opening. And we're all about to hear their broadcast. If you enjoyed this story, drop a like, subscribe, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. There are things they don't teach you in nursing school, the practical stuff. How to navigate the politics of hospital shifts, which doctors to avoid, where to find decent coffee at 3 a.m. And then there's the other stuff. The inexplicable things that happen in certain rooms, on certain floors with certain patients. I've been a night nurse at St. Margaret's Hospital for 11 years. The pay is better on nights, and I prefer the quiet. Usually, it's just the beeping of monitors, the soft squeak of orthopedic shoes on linoleum, and the occasional call button. That changed 3 months ago when they brought in the patient for room 731. The ambulance arrived at 2:17 a.m. No sirens, no rush, just a quiet admission for a John Doe found unconscious in the park. Male, approximately 60 years old, no identification, no visible trauma, stable vitals, non-responsive but breathing independently. A medical mystery, they said. Dr. Kapoor assigned him to 731, the room at the end of the east wing that had been empty for months. Nobody liked that room. The call button malfunctioned frequently. The overhead light flickered no matter how many times maintenance replaced the bulbs, and patients consistently reported feeling watched. Most requested transfers within a day, but John Doe couldn't request anything. He just lay there, eyes closed, breathing slow and even. His skin was unusually pale, almost translucent, blue veins visible beneath the surface like rivers on a map. His hair, silver white and fine as spiderweb, draped across the pillow in strange patterns that seemed to rearrange themselves between my rounds. The first night was uneventful. I checked his vitals every hour, adjusted his IV, noted no changes in his chart. Standard procedure. The second night things started to feel wrong. It began with the temperature. Room 731 was always cold, at least 10 degrees cooler than the rest of the floor despite the thermostat showing normal readings. But that night, my breath fogged in front of my face when I entered. The digital thermometer I brought in read 42 degrees Fahrenheit, yet the patient showed no signs of distress. Maintenance issue, my supervisor said when I reported it. I'll send someone up tomorrow. Later that same night, I noticed something odd about the patient's monitor. Between heartbeats, regular and slow at 52 beats per minute, another rhythm appeared. Faint, almost imperceptible, but definitely there. Like an echo or a shadow pulse. Exactly 1.5 seconds after each regular beat, I called Dr. Kapoor, who examined the readings and shrugged it off as equipment interference. "Old building, old wiring," he said. "Switch to manual monitoring if it bothers you." It did bother me, but not for the reason he thought. The shadow pulse was getting stronger each hour, while the primary heartbeat remained unchanged. On the third night, I heard the whispering. It started around midnight, a soft, sibilant sound coming from room 731. I assumed another nurse was with the patient, but when I checked, the room was empty save for John Doe, still motionless on the bed. Yet the whispering continued, rising and falling like distant conversation. I couldn't make out words, just the distinct rhythm of speech. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The corners of the room, the space behind the curtains, the air above the patient's bed. I checked the adjoining rooms. One was empty, the other contained an elderly woman sleeping soundly with her hearing aids on the nightstand. The whispering wasn't coming through the walls. When I returned to 731, the sound stopped abruptly. The silence that followed felt heavy, expectant. I hurried through my check and left, the hair on my arms standing upright despite the warmth of the hallway. The fourth night brought the smells, subtle at first, like damp soil after rain, then more complex, decaying leaves, stagnant water, something metallic like old pennies. The hospital's antiseptic odor couldn't mask it. The scent clung to my uniform after leaving the room, followed me down the hall, lingered in my nostrils for hours afterward. And John Doe remained unchanged, sleeping, breathing, existing in that strange liminal space between consciousness and something else. By the fifth night, I noticed the shadows. They moved differently in room 731, not following the laws of light and obstruction that governed the rest of the world. They stretched in impossible directions, formed shapes that resembled hands, faces, writhing bodies, always in my peripheral vision, always gone when I turned to look directly. My colleagues started avoiding the room. "Just a creepy vibe," they said. "Gives me the willies." They offered to trade assignments, double my other patients if I'd handle 731 alone. So I did. Someone had to care for him after all. On the seventh night, he opened his eyes. I was adjusting his saline drip when I felt a change in the air, a sudden pressure like the feeling before a thunderstorm. I turned to find him watching me, eyes wide and impossibly dark, not brown or hazel but black, pupil and iris indistinguishable, like looking into twin wells. I nearly dropped the IV bag. "Sir, can you hear me?" His lips remained still, but the whispering returned, louder now, seeming to emanate from his open mouth, though nothing moved. I leaned closer, trying to understand. Coming through now, found the way. Thin here, so thin. A cold, dry hand clutched my wrist. I tried to pull away, but his grip was like iron. Those black eyes never blinked as the whispers grew more frantic, more eager. Perfect vessel, waited so long, nearly time. With my free hand, I pressed the call button. Nothing happened, not even the usual beep acknowledging the signal had been sent. We were alone, cut off. "What do you want?" I whispered back, my voice shaking. The shadows in the room converged, pooling around the bed like spilled ink. The whispers multiplied, a chorus of inhuman voices speaking in tandem. To live again, to walk, to feed. His grip tightened, fingernails suddenly long and sharp, breaking my skin. 5 pinpricks of blood welled up, black in the strange half-light. The monitor beside us flatlined with a sustained tone. But the patient wasn't dying. He was more animate than ever, back arching as the shadows flowed into his mouth, nostrils, ears. The whispering reached a crescendo. "Through you." With a strength born of pure terror, I wrenched my arm free and stumbled backward. The overhead light exploded in a shower of sparks. In the strobing half-darkness, I saw his body convulsing, changing, limbs elongating, joints bending in impossible directions, skin rippling like water. I ran, past the nurse's station, down the stairwell instead of waiting for the elevator, out into the parking lot where I collapsed against my car, lungs burning. I called in sick the next day and the next. On the third day, I forced myself to return, half convinced I'd imagined everything. Room 731 was empty, bed neatly made. At the nurse's station, I asked about John Doe. "Transferred," said the charge nurse, not looking up from her computer. "Some specialist from Johns Hopkins came for him 2 nights ago. Rare neurological condition, apparently." "Did they leave paperwork? Contact information?" She frowned, finally meeting my eyes. "Of course, Dr. Leary handled it." She studied my face. "Are you feeling all right? You look pale." I nodded and went about my shift, trying to ignore the persistent ache in my wrist. The 5 puncture wounds had scabbed over, forming a perfect circle that throbbed in time with my pulse. That night, I checked the hospital records. There was no transfer documentation for the patient in room 731. No record of a doctor. Leary visiting. In fact, according to the system, room 731 had been empty for the past 3 months. Yet when I changed the dressing on my wrist later, I found the wounds had transformed. Not healing, but darkening, spreading beneath the skin in thin, root-like patterns. And sometimes when the hospital is quiet in those early morning hours, I hear whispering. Not from room 731, but from inside my own head. They're coming through now. They found the way, and I fear I'm the vessel they've been waiting for. If you enjoyed this story, please drop a like, hit subscribe, and let me know your thoughts in the comments section below.